Welcome back to the Mightier Pen, where I share narrative tips for the story-driven DM. Because while the pen can be mightier than the sword, it only becomes so with training. I'm Kate, an editor by trade, a writer by hobby, and a DM by default. Today we're stealing from other DMs as we talk about player agency. The Adventure Zone was the first D&D show that I really got into. I had watched Critical Role's first campaign, and I did love it, but the videos were so long that they weren't easy for me to get through. So when my sister recommended the Adventure Zone, with its podcast-only version that I could listen to on my commute, I know Critical Role also has a podcast version of their episodes, but I much preferred to watch the players if possible, and shorter episode lengths, I was instantly hooked. The story of Balance, the McElroy brothers and father's first campaign, is honestly some of the best storytelling I've ever encountered. I've gone back to listen to it multiple times, so it's inevitable that I've picked up a few things as a DM. Now, before I dive in, it's important to remember that D&D streams and podcasts, especially ones like the Adventure Zone, are created to be entertainment. And so they end up working a little differently than your standard session, focused more on story or jokes than the mechanics of the game. They're more likely to ignore the rules in favor of a good scene, which probably explains why I like the shows so much. I'm all about story. I've compiled a number of lessons that I've taken away from Griffin's time as a DM, specifically from the Balance arc. Some of these are things I've picked up from what I see working, but there are a number of extra episodes called the Adventure Zone, or TTAZZ, where the DM and 3 players answer questions submitted by fans and talk about the wider world they were building and the experiences they had while playing. 1. Macro and micro arcs. Griffin talked in the first TTAZZ about macro and micro arcs. His intent was that the macro arcs, the overarching plot points, were more rigidly under his control, but the micro arcs, the details from episode to episode, were a lot more flexible and dependent on player choices. Balance is a story that, without any major spoilers, centers around a number of magical artifacts. It's broken into chapters where the players are tasked with retrieving the magic items, 1 chapter per item. That's the goal. It's largely up to the players to figure out how to do so. That's not to say that Griffin doesn't give them options, but he's more willing to let them go outside of his plans for those portions than the portions that affect the larger story. You don't have to use the exact same formula, but I think it's important for DMs to prioritize what plot points, story beats, and plans are flexible and which are not. 2. Be inspired by the media you consume. Griffin is very open about what inspires and informs his storytelling. The whole campaign started with the D&D 5th edition starter kit and spiraled out from there. The different arcs were inspired by things like the Alien movie franchise and the Fast and Furious series. And, well, that's sort of the whole premise of what I'm doing here, gleaning what we can from the media we consume. 3. Allow player input. In my opinion, D&D is at its best when it's collaborative. I understand, believe me, I do, the urge to keep tight reins on your players so that they can experience the beautiful story you've created. But I found that some of the best moments happen when players do something unexpected. Griffin talks about a moment in one of the later episodes that he calls the arms outstretched moment. If you know, you know, but if you don't, I won't spoil it. He ended up scrapping almost 2 episodes worth of material because the PCs were able to avert a seemingly unavoidable event. But all 4 McElroys cite it as one of their favorite moments. There's this concept in improv called yes and, which encourages people to accept whatever their scene partner has done and build on it. It's hard, especially with a game like D&D, which has a lot of technical aspects that are hard to do on the fly. But I found that transparency with players doesn't ruin the moment. If things take a turn and I need to adjust, I'll ask for a 5-minute break. My players almost always spend that time talking about what just happened, guessing what might happen next, or just being excited about the game. It doesn't break the flow as much as you might worry it would. 4. Know your players. Is it really railroading if you can predict what your players will do? The McElroys had a bit of an advantage in playing D&D, in that they knew each other so well. Knowing players helps a DM predict with reasonable accuracy what they might do and prepare for it. But you don't have to be related to the players to know them. I've been DMing my table for over a year and a half now, and I've gotten so much better at understanding what both the players and the characters will do when faced with various problems. 5. Trust goes both ways. Respect the choices that are important to your players and trust that they'll do the same for you. I think the biggest piece of advice I have for anyone who plays D&D, not just DMs, is that it's not a conflict. Ideally, the players and the DM are working together to create the story, even if the DM has to play the villain. The DM, by default, knows more about the world and the story and what's going on, so the players should trust that the things the DM has planned make sense. But the DM should also trust that the players know their characters better and have their own contributions to make. Otherwise, you might as well just buy a couple of dolls and act out the story you want to tell on your own. I think this is really great advice for DMs, especially the ones like me who might struggle with allowing player agency. I'm a writer, and it can be hard for me to let go of the details and story points when they don't go the way I had planned. Your table is unique, and your story should be too. Tell me how you handle player agency in the comments. I'm Kate, and this has been The Mightier Pen. Keep honing those storytelling skills, and may you always be able to roll with the unexpected.